The idea that King Charles and Prince William, possibly accompanied by the Princess of Wales, are planning official visits to the United States this year has generated a wave of speculation that would be hilarious if it weren't so transparent. Because the moment you strip away the diplomatic language about strengthening ties and important roles, what you are left with is a familiar and almost farcical pattern, one in which the British royal establishment suddenly discovers an urgent interest in America whenever Prince Harry and Meghan Sussex continue thriving there, and the suggestion that these visits are anything other than a thinly veiled attempt to reclaim attention from the Sussexes feels less like serious statecraft and more like a badly rehearsed comedy routine, as though the palace is perpetually late to a party it once insisted wasn't worth attending, only to arrive breathless and indignant that everyone is already gathered around Harry and Meghan, because for a family that claims to have moved on from the Sussexes, they appear remarkably unable to stop orbiting their lives, their choices, and their success, especially in the very country Harry and Meghan now call home. And the absurdity lies in the assumption that relevance can be reclaimed through proximity, that simply landing on the same continent somehow diminishes the presence of a couple who have spent years embedding themselves into American cultural, charitable, and professional spaces, building credibility not through titles but through consistency. And it becomes even more laughable when you consider that America is not a nation inclined to bow, either literally or figuratively, because while Americans may enjoy the spectacle of royalty as a novelty, they respond far more strongly to authenticity, storytelling, and visible values, all of which Harry and Meghan Sussex have cultivated deliberately and at great personal cost, whereas King Charles, arriving with the weight of monarchy but without its unquestioned authority, risks appearing less like a figure of influence and more like a ceremonial relic touring a museum dedicated to a system the country was founded in opposition to. And Prince William's presence only sharpens the irony, because as heir, he has been protected for years by a media narrative that equates silence with strength and absence with dignity, a narrative that collapses the moment he steps into an American context where leadership is expected to be articulated rather than implied, where vulnerability is not treated as weakness, and where inherited destiny carries far less weight than demonstrated impact, making any attempt to overshadow Harry look not just futile, but self-defeating, because Harry has already done the work of defining himself on his own terms in the US, speaking openly about mental health, trauma, and institutional failure in a way that resonates deeply with American audiences, while William's carefully managed restraint risks coming across as emotional distance rather than gravitas. And then there is the rumoured involvement of Kate, which adds another layer of unintended comedy, because Kate has long been praised within Britain for fitting seamlessly into the royal mould, for never rocking the boat, never demanding change, and never forcing uncomfortable conversations. But exporting that model to the US as some sort of counterweight to Meghan Sussex only underscores how out of step the institution remains with the cultural environment it is attempting to impress. Since Meghan's American identity, confidence, and refusal to shrink herself have already redefined what public female leadership looks like in that space, and Kate, arriving as a carefully curated contrast, does not diminish Meghan's influence, but instead highlights the rigidity of a system that still mistakes compliance for virtue and silence for grace. And the real punchline in all of this is the notion that Harry and Meghan even need to be overshadowed at all, because they are not campaigning for royal relevance, not seeking palace approval, and not competing for tabloid favour, having deliberately stepped away from that entire ecosystem. Yet the monarchy behaves as though every Sussex appearance, every project, every moment of visibility is a provocation, a reminder of what it failed to protect and refused to change. And this insecurity is precisely what makes the rumoured US visits so transparent, because rather than projecting confidence, they betray a lingering obsession, an inability to accept that Harry and Meghan's success outside the institution exposes its limitations more effectively than any criticism ever could. And the more the palace tries to insert itself into the American narrative as a corrective force, the more it reveals how little organic influence it actually holds there, since American audiences are not conditioned to revere titles or defer to tradition, and they are certainly not inclined to view family rivalry dressed up as diplomacy as anything other than awkward, especially when the Sussexes' presence in the US is not episodic but continuous, not ceremonial but participatory, because Harry and Meghan are not visiting America. They are living there, working there, raising their children there, and contributing to conversations that matter to Americans in real time, while royal visits, no matter how grandly framed, remain temporary, symbolic, and ultimately peripheral. And it is this contrast that makes the entire situation feel like a recurring sketch in which the monarchy repeatedly trips over its own denial, insisting it has moved on while following the Sussexes across oceans, insisting it is focused on duty while reacting to every shift in public attention, and insisting it represents stability while appearing rattled by the independent success of a couple it once dismissed as irrelevant. And perhaps the most telling aspect of this rumoured US push is how little it seems rooted in genuine curiosity about American priorities or cultural realities, instead feeling like a reactive manoeuvre driven by palace anxiety rather than strategic vision. Because if the monarchy truly understood the US landscape, it would recognise that influence there is not claimed through symbolism, but earned through sustained engagement, and that Harry and Meghan Sussex have already done what no amount of royal pageantry can replicate, which is to build trust by showing up consistently, speaking honestly, and aligning their work with values that resonate beyond borders. And the attempt to spark on Harry and Meghan in their own home country, whether intentional or not, only reinforces the impression of a family that cannot let go, that cannot accept divergence, and that cannot resist the urge to reassert hierarchy even in spaces where hierarchy holds no currency, turning what could have been a dignified, forward-looking diplomatic effort into something faintly ridiculous, because nothing undermines authority faster than the appearance of jealousy, and nothing invites satire more readily than an institution insisting it is unbothered while acting perpetually bothered. And as these plans continue to circulate, the laughter they provoke is not cruel, but inevitable, because it stems from the sheer disconnect between intent and outcome, between what the palace hopes to achieve and how its actions are actually perceived. And in the end, the greatest irony of all is that by trying so hard to overshadow Harry and Meghan Sussex in the United States, the monarchy only amplifies the very truth it seems desperate to avoid, which is that relevance today is not inherited, it is built, not enforced, but earned. And the more the palace chases the Sussexes across the Atlantic, the clearer it becomes who has already figured that out and who is still pretending the old rules apply.